This is the Open University.
Being underrated is underrated. That's the proposition I want to sell to you today in my unique manner. As somebody who's ironically kind of famous for saying that everybody will be famous in future for 15 people, which of course I adapted from a very famous person who knew all about fame and in fact based his whole career on the principles of fame, celebrity, recognition, and that's Andy Warhol. I sort of spirited this into my niche world, my indie underground world, where I was, according to The Guardian, the David Bowie of the art pop underground. That's one of my favourite quotes about myself. But it's as if they're saying that if David Bowie had never made it, this is what he might have become, and that I'm sort of cautionary tale. But yes, I took this not only from the world of genuine fame, although it's debatable whether Andy Warhol was about genuine fame or whether he was simply playing a game, and he happened to get lucky. A lot of fame is about luck. I luckily never had the luck of getting famous, and I spirited this idea of being famous for 15 people away from Andy Warhol's 15 minutes, where you were going to be mega famous for 15 minutes, in some tellings of his quote, into my indie world of sort of Calvinist rejection of mainstream fame, the big labels, the big five, as it was at the time. Possibly it was 8 at the time I said that. Now it's down to like 2 big labels, if there are any labels left, record labels. But I also took that from the analog world, which Andy Warhol was negotiating fame in. He knew all about how to get into the newspapers and the television and how to do commercials on broadcast TV. I took that into the digital world, where we are all now celebrities, minor celebrities for our family and our friends and our followers. I just downloaded a new app yesterday called TikTok, and I downloaded it only because I saw a tweet in which somebody said, I'm addicted to TikTok, this new platform which is kind of replacing Vine. It's these very short meme-like viral videos, potentially viral videos. This person tweeted that it was only because there seemed to be lots of people on there who liked Momus. And I dutifully searched for myself on TikTok and found these 2 songs of mine, very unexpectedly being successful there, being multiply used as songs, soundtracks for little short videos. One of them is Following, which comes from, I think, the what was it called? That album with all the Bowie and Devoto covers on it. I think it's late on in that Terpsichore album. And of course, people use that because I'm so totally following you is the line. They want to say to other people that they want to make famous in their 15 people kind of scenario. That I'm totally following you, man, because I love your Instagram, your TikTok, whatever account you're on. I'm following you. It has become the new way of saying, I like you, I approve of you. So that song Following was one of them. The other song was this very scary song from Bambi, which is called Lip Gloss. And I don't really know why people like that song so much. Lots of sort of very wholesome young women are saying, I love the sound of this, the dark sound of this song. So perhaps it's part of some weird S&M kind of world that we're entering into, where everybody's post 50 Shades of Grey, everybody's into... And Polanski as well, you'd think he's a sort of toxic brand. He's in the video for that song. And I don't know, maybe the time has come for my brand of transgression, but wouldn't that be scary if my time really had come? And I had to deal with actual fame of some kind, substantial fame. The first thing to say, I guess, is that obscurity, which we're talking about today, and fame are simply waypoints on the same scale. And really, even someone as obscure as me has enjoyed a lot of the attention, including sexual attention, financial attention, and a creative pleasure in and of itself. of somebody further along the scale, like, for instance, David Bowie. I was listening this morning in the bath on my earpods to an interview he gave in 1990, and I've been reading a lot of blog accounts of people making compilations for David Bowie round about that time as well. The Sound and Vision compilation. Some guy who actually compiled this for the record label has done a big blog about where Bowie was positioned at that point, and he couldn't get arrested, really. He had this awful sense of not being able to live up to his past because he's had such a stellar past in the 1970s, something I have never had to contend with. So mark that up as one of the benefits of Obscurity. You're not standing at the foot of and dwarfed by the mountains of your past achievement. At least I don't think I am. There's actually a running blog now. What's it called again? I'll do a link to it under this, about my music, in the same way that Bowie Songs was about David Bowie's music, album by album, song by song. And this guy called John Robinson is doing one about me, and he's got up to Tender Pervert now, which I guess is my big selling record because it sold like 10,000 copies or whatever. It was released on Polygram in Canada. That's why it's called Tender Pervert and not The Homosexual. But, and I'm saying to him, he said at the beginning when he sort of launched this exercise that he was going to do cover a lot of material he hadn't heard, which I suppose Chris O'Leary at Bowie Songs also was doing. And in following that blog, I heard a lot of Bowie songs I'd never heard before, and a lot of his late material I'd never heard. Same with John Robertson. He's never heard a lot of my more recent albums. He's going to have to hunt them down. It's quite difficult to find them because they're released only on this American label in relatively small quantities. And some of the online versions are very unreliable, like the Spotify version of Stars Forever, which is just gobbledygook and glitches. I don't know, some joker must have done that deliberately at some point to get at me, I don't know. Or perhaps it's just a piece of incompetence which seems to stand unchallenged. I don't know. Nobody ever seems to do anything about that. Spotify. I'm looking forward to the bits when John comes to my later albums, because obviously that's the last 10 years especially, the last 20 years more generally, but the last 10 is really kind of obviously it expresses who I feel I am now. But who are you if you've been on this weird scale of trying to be a celebrity? Have I even been trying to be a celebrity? I don't know. Bowie used to say, and it became a bit of a cliche he would trot out, that the only good thing about being famous is being able to get a restaurant table. I'm not really into restaurants, and I'm not really into particular tables in restaurants, so that seems a fairly futile gain. Obviously being mega rich might have helped at some point, but Bowie was terribly poor. He had no money in the late 70s. During his best creative periods, he had the least money, and vice versa. When he had a lot of money in the 80s, he made appalling art. So it doesn't really recommend. And also, he died very young. I mean, I'm hoping to live more than another 10 years, which is all Bowie got, because of his drug addiction, his alcoholism, and his cigarette habit. So, and those things are all kind of, you're egged on by fame into those dangerous zones. And Bowie himself says in this 1990 interview I was listening today that, the good work he did in the 70s was very much the result of living in dangerous zones, living dangerously with drugs especially. So I've never been tempted. Of course, a lot of loser, inverted commas, musicians have become heroin addicts, etc., and just being famous in itself is not necessarily the most dangerous thing. But studies have shown, we've gone into this before, studies have shown that the average age of mortality for people who've had top 10 albums in the UK or the US is 59 years old. 57 years old. I'm already 2 years past it. But I never had those hits. One of the things I'm doing right now is focusing in the sort of intense and obsessive manner in which I usually do focus on these things, which are not projects imposed on me, they're just things I suddenly get interested in. Focusing on the cover for Niche, which is my memoir coming out in July of 2020. And we're tossing ideas around. Me and the art department at Farrar, Straus and Giroux in New York are tossing ideas around for what it should look like. And I have noticed comments from both the art director and my editor there. We're slightly on different pages. I'm very much into the idea of raiding the FSG archive for fantastic 60s covers they did with their writers like Robert Lowell. And that obviously flies with them. They love the idea of... it's a bit like when I first signed to Creation. I was sort of so in love with the name Creation, the brand image of Creation Records, that I really just wanted to... the Tender Pervert cover, one of the reasons Bobby Gillespie kind of pastiched it 20 years after I made it in 1988 is that it was almost the archetypal Creation cover. It's me in a sort of demonic pose with my horns in front of some blossom shot at night. We shot it in Hyde Park, me and Tommy Wroblewski, the designer, and it was my conception really to pay tribute to all the flowers in the sky kind of imagery, the psychedelic and slightly demonic imagery, all mostly borrowed from the Rolling Stones and this kind of thing in the 60s that Creation were into. So I'm now going through a similar kind of honeymoon period with, oh gosh, that sounds terrible, as if I'm going to fall out with them at some point, with Farrar, Straus and Giroux, sort of really buying into their imagery. But I'm a European and they're Americans, and I'm also very much into books which look like failed books. In other words, which look like grubby library books, which look old-fashioned and understated. So I'm doing a lot of spidery little doodles on these pastiches and kind of, fingerprints and stickers, and but all rather toned down. So when Alex, the designer at FSG, gets into this mode, he tends to do quite shiny pastiches of old books. They don't really look old. They don't really have the patina, the wabi-sabi of my version. So I think there's a slight... we're slightly arm wrestling about this. Alex I think he's a bit overwhelmed with all the covers I'm sending him. I'm sending him like 3 a day. And he's gone a bit quiet recently, so he's probably working on other stuff. What I tend to forget, of course, with FSG is that I'm not the client. The client is FSG, so Alex is working for them and he's not working for me. So it's a bit like being the writer on a film set, The director's there, the whole cast is there, as a cinematographer. They're all auteurs in their own way. Of course, increasingly in the late 20th century, they were considering themselves as auteurs, and the writer of the novel that the film's based on really he might have a chair if he's lucky on the set, but he'd probably be kicked off eventually. So it wouldn't surprise me if I was kicked off this project. I would love to do my own cover, as I've done for instance, I did for Un-America. With a little press like Penny Anti-Press, you can do that. With FSG, they will probably they'll look at these covers that I'm proposing and they'll think, these are deliberately shooting themselves in the foot commercially. They don't look like big, bold, confident commercial propositions. They look like somebody who actually wants to have a book which only sells a feeble couple of thousand of copies. And probably that is true, that I don't want a successful book. I want a book which lives up to my principles of the books I love. Let me just grab a little pile of the books that I love. I was in my favourite second-hand bookshop yesterday, and I bought these. I spent €9, all of €9 on these books, which are classically boring in a sense and serious-looking German literary books of various kinds, belletristique, as they say in German, with a K on the end. This is Inselverlag, I'm really into these Inselverlag books. I've got about 10 of them. Of course, I can't read them because my German's really not up to it, but and this is a typical Reklam paperback. But I like also the Reklams that students have doodled on, because they were so bored by their lessons that they spent, the teacher was droning on about Goethe or somebody, and they were doodling. I photographed a beautiful one where somebody had actually made a Turkish student had made a Turkish version of the blurb on the back of a Reklam book about a 19th century novel, all about living by the Bosphorus. It was like Wilhelm Meister's apprenticeship or something. And this person had made a whole thing about being a donor vendor on the shores of the Bosphorus, which I thought was very creative and fascinating. And I'm fascinated by the doodles that are done on these Reklam paperbacks. But of course, it does bespeak boredom. And if you're doing a cover for a new book, for a memoir, your life story, and it looks like somebody was so bored by the proposition of this book, or the cover of this book, that they started, doing spider webs inside the letters and this kind of thing. Surely you're suggesting there's something wrong. It should be exciting. But of course, what I hate about mainstream culture is this endless kind of aggressive insistence that it's interesting and exciting and must be paid attention to. This is why I'm probably never going to open the TikTok app again, because it looks so intensely, overwhelmingly exciting, compelling. I hate things which are compelling. Anything which isn't compelling is my enemy. The idea that, oh, look, here's a video of my cat which tried to jump onto the dresser and had an epic fail. It's amusing. It's amusing to me. It's amusing to everybody who's human, of course. Everyone who's ever met a cat. I mean, that's terribly funny. But I don't want a succession of these compelling videos, which are, 10 seconds each. Absolutely hate it. There's another one I saw on the TikTok thing where a guy is saying, "Hi, this is me after 1 week in Germany," and then, "Hi, this is me after 1 month in Germany." And of course, his accent gets more and more, and then he becomes totally fluid German speaker, fluent barrage of German by the last one. All that within 10 seconds. Then you get a guy doing a parody of that and saying, "This is me after 1 week in German." And, he never gets any better. Sorry, I'm rubbish at languages. And that's kind of, I guess that's more... It's more my style, that you do something that's deliberately pathetic. And of course, you depend on the impactful commercial speech. I mean, I hate commercials. The more I use my iPad, the more commercials I see, because I'm used to, on my laptop, I have AdBlock installed in YouTube, and I can watch endless videos on YouTube without seeing any advertising at all, thanks to AdBlock. And this is where... YouTube becomes a more interesting platform for me than, say, Facebook, because Facebook, no matter which blockers I try, I use a thing called Social Fixer on Facebook, which actually does remove some of the sponsored content from your feed. But Facebook is so nefarious in taking the word sponsored out of the code that these blockers would be able to read and therefore block the sponsored ads, that the Social Fixer is really struggling to keep up. Obviously, they're a small one-man operation, essentially. Facebook is a massive, megalithic corporation. And their whole enterprise is making you see ads. Obviously, that is how they operate. But I hate ads. I really hate the tone of compulsion and of interestingness and kind of glossiness that takes over. Of course, advertising is more and more going into product placement. People doing their videos. I mean, I watch... TLDR News, for instance, where they have sponsorship and, I don't know if they have product placement in that, but more and more people are, tobacco companies are paying people to smoke cigarettes on Chatterbait, probably, to make it look sexy, because they can't advertise anywhere else, at least in the West. In developed countries, they can't. In underdeveloped countries, they're advertising everywhere, trying to kill their customers, which doesn't make much sense, but kill them slowly. So it is a horribly evil world, this mainstream world. And of course, in pop music, it was mostly characterized by dreadful banality, the banality of most episodes of Top of the Pops or of commercial radio. It's been a deluge of banality. And this is the whole point about being niche, is excising yourself from the context of that banality, changing the context of what pop music could be. I put pop music more into the context of a library, decanting material content from books and putting it into songs, being a cantautore, decanting cantautore. Excuse me, there's some noise outside because there's people cleaning the streets. You've got to clean the streets, I guess. Maybe I could go into a quieter room or loll in the doorway. Why is it fantastic to be obscure? It's fantastic to be obscure and to be underrated, because in a sense, underratedness orients you to the future. I still feel, as I said to Ariel Pink in our interview a couple of years ago, I still feel that success is ahead of me, but it's also a success which can be like some sort of weird tantric orgasm. It can be indefinitely postponed. I don't need to actually experience the real success. I just like the sort of the foreglow, not the afterglow, but the foreglow of a sense of possible success. My mother is convinced that my memoir will be a massive success and I'll become famous. Absolutely not the case. It really has become clear to me that over time, that my work can never be successful on any level, really. I mean, it can be successful on a narcissistic level, absolutely. It can't be successful commercially because there aren't enough people out there who think as I think. In terms of these Open University vlogs, which I've been doing, I level off at 1,000. There was one I did a couple of years ago saying, why is there this glass ceiling? I can never get more than 1,000 views. Actually, it's leveled off at pretty much 1,000 views for each video. If I'm lucky, it might be only 600 for a less interesting topic. But it seems that there are 1,000 people out there, whatever I do. It seems that if I make a vlog, if I make a record, if I make a book, it's the same kind of 1,000 people. And it's very difficult to imagine. When I was talking to the promotions people at FSG, they're obviously pitching for something a bit more impactful than that, and it's really hard to imagine how you would break through that glass ceiling. I suggested committing some kind of crime, or like faking my own death. Oh hell, I've given it away. Or rather, faking the faking of my own death, which is a bit scary, because then actually if you're faking the faking of your death, you really have to die. It cancels out as a kind of promotional strategy, but one wouldn't actually want to die for selling a few more books. But I guess, I don't know, being put on Trump's danger list of, no-fly list, that would actually be a good way to justify not flying to America to promote the book when it comes out as well. It could actually put it about that I was like Cat Stevens and all these people who became Muslims, that I was on the no-fly list. Or Richard, what's his name, Thompson, became a Muslim and is still a Muslim, but lives in America and is absolutely appalled by how America has gone. So yeah, I mean, various strategies, but they will all be futile. I just know in advance that they will not succeed, because I'm destined to a kind of obscurity which I really enjoy. I really love walking down streets in various cities not being recognized, or if I am recognized, people just keeping very quiet about it. It would be appalling to be so famous that you just couldn't go out and do normal things. I love doing normal things. I love walking around and even skulking around and sort of doing slightly disreputable things. If I were famous, I would have a reputation that could be undermined. The blurb actually FSG has put up on Amazon for the pre-order page on Amazon for the book, which is still not out for almost a year, says he's a self-confessed pervert. I was almost going to ask them to change that, because in fact, if you look at Tender Pervert, it's just a euphemism for homosexual, and the song The Homosexual on that album was actually about not being a homosexual. So, logically, Tender Pervert is kind of about not being a pervert. But, and also, records are never autobiographical. The narrative voice in a song is never a simple confession or, So I don't think self-confessed pervert is really accurate. But, not to say I'm not a pervert. It's a non-denial denial. Being perverse is kind of wonderful. And I think in a wider sense, being perverse in terms of celebrity has actually put me in a fairly good place. I'm pretty happy with my career, that it can be an ongoing and unfolding adventure in art, rather than a question of being recognized on the street or even bozos. I mean, it's funny that word bozo sounds like Bojo, which is the nickname of our British Prime Minister, who is a bozo himself. It would be awful if bozos recognised me and sort of stalked me on the street and were terribly excited. To be Morrissey or somebody like that would be a kind of terrible failure for me, really. I'm not used to having two cameras here. Obviously, I've gone up in the world if I have two cameras. I'm talking to camera B at the moment, but I don't know where to put my eye contact. Anyway, that was the Open University, trying to justify obscurity. Why it's actually kind of wonderful to be underrated and kind of wonderful to be obscure. As long as you can keep producing. This is my new definition of success: is fail longer.
Open University.